Welcome back, folks, and here is the material for this project plus a little extra for the next project. The epoxy slab comes from a 2-to-1 deep pour, and here's the stripping of it. This form was amazingly easy to strip, assemble, disassemble. It was simply screws going into threaded inserts. I found it on Amazon and with a little mold release. This thing was super slick. Boom, there's our slab. So I decided that I'm only going to show the machining of the epoxy, although I do it with the wood also. We've all seen wood go through a table saw. The epoxy is really what we want to see. Followed by a table saw is the surface planer. Being that we're going to be working with epoxy and a glue that's going to be shown through the epoxy clear, I went one more step and brought it through the drum sander. Here's a blade shadowing technique I use to split my material directly in half. With the saw off and the shop lights dimmed, I put a spotlight at the exit side of the table saw. I can then move the fence over to where it casts a shadow on my material in my designated center. Once set, we can then lower our blade to just over halfway through our material and we're ready to rip. I've ripped lots of staves this way, but something about watching that blade go through the material and having a visual on it was really daunting. But no problems at all, just like wood. Almost. Grainless wood. First separation of material for this project and our next project. The shorter staves are for our next, and 2/3 of these longer are for this project. We gotta get rid of that saw mark and bring that down for epoxy glue. All right, we're ready to glue up. This is my first time of using this 1-to-1 epoxy glue. It's got a full working time of 1 hour, and then the cure time is 24 hours. It's supposed to stay crystal clear and not yellow. We'll see how it all turns out over time. I think I might have found my new favorite way to glue up a tangential arrangement, though. I love this glue. All right, we're going to fast forward this a little bit here. So once all the staves are in our hose clamps here, we'll snug them up. Careful not to over tighten because we are short of a full circle. We have 24 staves at 14 degrees, giving us 336 degrees. 24 degrees short of a full 360. So we have a large, or not large space, but a degree of space for every stave. Doing this allows for a twist, and when that twist happens, it takes up that loss. The bottom of our press here is a ball that is taped in a cone. That ball sits in an indentation on the lower ply. In between the two pieces of ply is a piece of parchment paper to keep everything from sticking together. The upper piece of ply is a 5 3/8 diameter, which is 3/8 larger than what we want for our finish diameter or press. We'll make a core set of these hose clamps once we get this top all pressed together here. On the top side, we're going to drop the same cone and ball, but we're going to offset the center here and add another larger cone, same pitch of cone, but larger cone and larger ball. And I needed a little bit extra to get that center to press in there. On the lower side of this is just reverse of the bottom of the press. We have our radius with parchment paper in between. And once the glue is all cleaned up, I can take my gloves off and start on the corset. Plenty of time. I love working with this glue. Gave me lots of time to do this.
The next day,
being that it's still winter time here in northwest Colorado and with several feet of snow still on the ground, I decided to bring the press in the house so the glue would have a constant temperature to cure in. I was slightly worried about the hose clamps getting glued to our blank, but stainless steel, it came right off, and there's our blank, ladies and gentlemen. Here, with a very light touch of a rotary tool, we'll remove the layer of epoxy glue exposing bare wood. This way we can use hot glue to attach this to the lathe. So the shop was a wee bit chilly, so I'm using a heat gun to heat up the material a little bit. This way the hot glue doesn't get hard upon initial contact with the material. Gives it time to flow and for me to get it set properly. And with the use of a live center on the tailstock, we can bring this forward and rotate it in as we press, and ba-boom! An hour later, we're ready to turn. So now we have our blanks sectioned off here. As I mentioned before, we're only going to use 2/3 of this blank for this project. The upper third that's nearest the headstock is going to eventually get totally cut off when we turn this thing around. All right, finalizing the shape here a little bit. Again, this top third is for another project. It looks really bad right now, but that top section is going to get cut off. Some sanding, and then we'll mount up the steady rest. All right, before we start hollowing out this bottom section of our vessel, we're going to core this thing through all the way to the upper cone. The reason why is it allows us to use the live center later when we flip this around to automatically true up it from the original setting here. Now that we got the bottom of our vessel hollowed out, we're going to go ahead and do a good sanding sealer. Being the stem of this is so small, this will be the last time that we're going to be able to work it. The blue tape is to keep raw material for glue up to our plug/foot of our vessel. So off comes the steady rest. We're going to get ready to do our plug/foot for our vase here. We're going to remove the vessel here with the chuck. And on comes our piece of purple heart. We're going to make a tenon on this to begin with. Once we got that formed, we're going to change out the jaws on this chuck to the smaller. And this will be the final grab here until our vessel is done. Will be that tenon right there. We're ready to glue this up. This is the first time I've used this epoxy also. This is a 1 minute set time. Cures in 1 hour, so I was really excited to be able to glue this, and an hour later I was able to come back. Finally, the top comes off of this, and we're ready to finish forming the exterior of our vase. We're going to use the original core with the live center on our tailstock to true it up. So upon finishing up the shape of our exterior, we're going to move up our steady rest and finish hollowing out the inside. The whole time I was planning on doing an epoxy top coat on this, so we're going to have to do a really good sanding sealer and close up the wood grain so we don't have bubbles bleeding into our finish. All right, second time back into the house with this project. We have it on a rig that I built for applying an epoxy top coat to my turnings. Typically, I use it for pens. This is the largest vessel that I have done an epoxy top coat with. Right now, the rig is tipped up to get a good epoxy top coat onto the inside of the vessel. Once I like it, we'll lay it down into its final setting, which is laying down like this. This is driven with a tumbler motor that turns between 2.5 and 3 RPMs, very, very slow. So we're going to speed this up here too. I rotate this as to coming up from my pour, so it lays the material down without capturing bubbles between the epoxy and your finished piece. Works out really smooth. I'll keep this thing running for the full 24 hours while this epoxy top coat cures. To remove all the excess off of this, when we get this coated here, we'll tip it up towards the exit of the vessel, the top of the vessel, allowing all the excess to drip out. And then we'll burn off any bubbles that occurred during mixing of the epoxy. Epoxy, epoxy, epoxy. Sweet, we're about ready to call this project a wrap. We just need to remove this tenon with the use of a grinder and an orbital sander. We'll put our finish on and call her complete.